Same locker room, same pinstripes, same stadium, two men. One drank before practice, the other was at the field by 6. One couldn't remember where he'd been the night before. The other was at the field by 6. One laughed at rules, the other was the rules. Baseball history has never seen two players like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig on the same team at the same time. And for 12 years they did exactly that. They won together. They broke records together. And then one day they stopped speaking. For 2 full years. Same locker room. Same pinstripes. Complete silence. What happened between them, and why did it end the way it did? It begins with 2 childhoods so different they might as well have been from different planets. Ruth was born in 1895 in Baltimore. His parents ran a tavern and sent him to St. Mary's Industrial School at age 7. Not because he'd done anything wrong, because they didn't want to deal with him. The most beloved figure in American sports history was abandoned by his parents as a child, dropped at a school run by Catholic brothers and essentially forgotten. His father visited twice in 12 years. What Ruth got instead of family was baseball, and brother Matthias. The 6'6" monk who became the closest thing to a father Ruth ever knew, who saw something in the wild Baltimore kid and taught him how to channel it into something a diamond could contain. Ruth didn't just love baseball because he was good at it. Ruth loved baseball because baseball was the only family he'd ever had. Lou Gehrig's world was completely different. Born in 1903 in Manhattan's Yorkville neighborhood to German immigrant parents. His father was a janitor. His mother, Christina, was a cook who worked multiple jobs and saved every dollar so Louis Heinrich Gehrig could have the opportunities she never did. 3 of Gehrig's 4 siblings died in childhood. When Lou survived, when Lou showed talent, Christina poured everything into him. Lou understood the weight of that. He worked harder than anyone because he knew exactly what his mother had sacrificed. He went home for her cooking because that table was sacred. Ruth had no mother. Gehrig had one who was everything. That difference would eventually destroy their friendship in ways neither man expected. They became Yankees together in 1923. Ruth was already a legend, 28 years old, fresh off seasons that had redefined what baseball thought was possible. He arrived at spring training like a force of nature. Loud, enormous, magnetic. His breakfast was 18 eggs and a T-bone steak. Not occasionally, routinely. He could drink all night and hit home runs the next afternoon. He defied logic. He defied medicine. And somehow it worked brilliantly. Gehrig was 20 years old, serious, disciplined, the product of a mother who accepted nothing less than full effort every day. First practice, Gehrig arrived early. Ruth arrived eventually, watched the young German kid take extra batting practice and wandered over. Said nothing for a long moment. Then said something Ruth rarely said to anyone. "Kid, that's a real swing you've got." Coming from Ruth, that was a knighthood. The 1927 Yankees are widely considered the greatest baseball team ever assembled. Not one of the greatest. The greatest. 110 wins. World Series in 4 straight. And at the center, Ruth and Gehrig. Back to back in the lineup. 3 and 4. Ruth chasing 60 home runs. Gehrig hitting .373 with 47 home runs and 175 RBI. The most feared 1-2 combination in the history of the game. They pushed each other constantly. Ruth would hit one, Gehrig would hit one, Ruth would hit 2 more. Less like teammates competing, and more like 2 forces of nature trying to outdo the universe. Off the field, they were genuine. They went hunting together, fishing together. Ruth called Gehrig kid even when Gehrig was 30 years old, and one of the most decorated players alive. Gehrig called Ruth babe the way you say a name when you actually know the person behind it. Ruth was what Gehrig could never be, completely and recklessly free. Gehrig was what Ruth could never be, the same reliable man every single day. They valued in each other exactly what they couldn't find in themselves. If you've ever lost a friendship to something that felt preventable, something that somehow got bigger than both of you, subscribe right now. Because what happened next is one of the most human stories baseball ever told. Then the mothers got involved. Ruth remarried in 1929. His second wife, Claire, was sharp, fashionable, socially ambitious. Claire, Ruth, and Christina Gehrig met at a team social event. What exactly was said has been disputed for decades. What is certain is this: something happened. Words were exchanged. Christina Gehrig was offended deeply. The kind of offended a German immigrant mother of the 1930s doesn't recover from gracefully. She told Lou. And Lou, who had spent his entire life honoring his mother's sacrifices, did the only thing his loyalty allowed. He stopped speaking to Ruth. Completely. Immediately. Without asking for Ruth's version. And Ruth, who had never been good with emotional nuance, who dealt with conflict by pretending it didn't exist, said nothing in return. The silence began. 2 years. 730 days. Same locker room. Same dugout. Complete silence. Their teammates existed in a bizarre reality where two legends pretended the other didn't exist. Ruth left the Yankees after 1934. 39 years old, his body finally surrendering to what his choices had demanded. Gehrig played on. Consecutive games. 2,130 of them in a row. A streak that seemed less like a record and more like a statement. He never missed a game. Not with broken fingers, not with fevers. He played through everything because missing meant letting his team down, and that was simply not something Lou Gehrig did. Then 1938 arrived, and something was wrong. His hands weren't responding. His balance was off in small ways only he could detect. He hit .295 that season. Still respectable, but not Gehrig. The 1939 season confirmed it immediately. 8 games in, hitting .143. On May 2nd, he walked into manager Joe McCarthy's office and told him to take him out of the lineup. The streak was over. Just like that. The Iron Horse walked to the dugout and watched from the bench for the first time in 15 years. His teammates gave him the lineup card. It was the only thing any of them could think to do. Mayo Clinic, June 1939. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. A disease that destroys motor neurons, irreversible, progressive, fatal. He was 36 years old. The strongest man anyone had ever seen in a baseball uniform was told his own nervous system was consuming itself. Gehrig absorbed this with the same quiet discipline he'd brought to every obstacle in his life. Called Eleanor. Said, "I have some news." July 4th, 1939. Yankee Stadium. Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day. 61,200 people, former teammates brought back from across the country. Speeches, gifts, and then the crowd started chanting. Louder, louder still. "We want Lou." Gehrig stood at the microphone, looked at his hands, then looked up. "Fans, for the past 2 weeks you have been reading about a bad break I got. Yet today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." He meant it. This was not performance. This was Lou Gehrig, son of a janitor, and a woman who worked 3 jobs, standing in the stadium that had given him everything, telling 61,000 people the truth. Ruth was there. Of course Ruth was there. Had gotten in his car without hesitation the moment he heard about the ceremony. Had not called ahead. Had simply arrived. Because whatever had happened between them, whatever the silence had built between 2 men who had once been brothers, none of it was bigger than this. When the ceremony ended, Ruth walked across the field. Gehrig saw him coming. Ruth put his arms around Gehrig. Gehrig put his arms around Ruth. In front of 61,000 people. The 2 men who had defined the greatest dynasty in baseball history stood there and held on. Some silences end not with words, but with presence. Lou Gehrig died June 2, 1941, 37 years old. Ruth got the call and sat down and stayed sitting for a long time. He didn't have language for what he felt. What he had was the knowledge that the man who had stood beside him through the greatest years of his life was gone. Ruth himself died August 16, 1948, 53 years old. Over 100,000 people came to Yankee Stadium to pay their respects. They stood in lines stretching around the block in August heat. They came because of what he had given them, not the statistics. Permission. Permission to believe that something impossible was about to happen every time he walked to the plate. Two men, different in every measurable way. Who found something in each other that their differences couldn't contain? Who built something together that 2 years of silence couldn't completely destroy? Who came back to each other in the only way the situation allowed? With arms, with presence, walking across a field in front of 61,000 people because whatever else was true, that was true too. Ruth visited Gehrig regularly in the months that followed, went to his house, sat with him. The disease progressed with the efficiency of something that doesn't negotiate. Gehrig lost the use of his hands, then his legs. Ruth came and sat and talked the way Ruth talked, filling silence with whatever came into his head. The same quality that had annoyed so many people for so many years became a gift. Because Gehrig couldn't always speak, and Ruth could always speak, and so the room was never empty in the wrong way. That was what Babe Ruth had always been. Not the home runs, not the records. The self, completely available, completely present. That was Ruth. That was always Ruth.